Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking in Stations. My name is Fish. I'll be your host today. We have a very special episode of Talking in Stations. We're going to be featuring the game EVE Galaxy Conquest. Now, I know this may not be EVE Online, but for those who remember me from a couple of years ago, I was a big proponent of EVE Echoes, which is a mobile game. EVE Galaxy Conquest, again, is a mobile game, but it features the very same excellent community, the EVE community, which we have today is featuring a panel of guests of various corps in the veteran server, which is the first ever veteran server in EVE Galaxy Conquest. Today, we're going to talk about gameplay. We're going to talk about how the season is different from the various seasons previous. We're going to talk about the different rankings and different corps and just kind of nerd out about, spaceships and spreadsheets. So without further ado, we're going to welcome our panel. Everybody say hello. Here we have our panel. Say welcome to our different corp leaders, or not, I guess not corp leaders specifically, but we have leadership from various teams. We have Reginald from Imperium. Reginald, you want to say hi?
Hello everyone, I'm Reginald and I'm here to represent Imperium, which is the Amar faction currently.
And let's see, we have Anthem of Chaos, who is the CEO of No Mercy. Do you want to say hi?
Hello! My name's Anthem. I'm from No Mercy. We're currently in the Calari faction.
Epic.
And that's about it.
And Doomsy, where do you come from and which faction?
Hey, obviously ODoomsy. I'm with New Order. We are the Galente faction at the moment.
Awesome. All right, so we will just dive right into questions. Let's see. Reginald, can you tell me a little bit about what got you interested in EVE Galaxy Conquest?
Well, basically I have been like fan of the EVE universe for a long time. I just didn't really have time to properly delve into the EVE Online world. But then I saw an ad that a new phone game is coming out and it was EVE branded. So I was like, cool, let's check this out. And now I am spending insane amount of time on it. So here we go.
That's kind of funny that you mentioned that. So you said you didn't have as much time to play EVE Online. Is it mostly because it wasn't mobile and it could move with you, or did you find that just this game became so engaging that you've started to spend more time in it as much as you would have in EVE Online?
Yeah, I was basically trapped. I knew in EVE Online I would have to spend all of my day online, so I didn't want to go into it. And then I got into this game, and I'm already spending all my time here. But yeah, that's what happened. This is my game now.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely feel you on that. I feel like I've spent a significant chunk of time. I don't have any alts. Personally, I don't think I could have time for it. Anthem, what do you think? Have you played EVE Online before or any other EVE games?
Oh yeah, I played EVE for quite a while, since 2007. I had to end up stopping it, had, wife, kids, time all of a sudden. Time to actually sit at a computer without a kid climbing on you pretty much drops to zero. So whenever they came out with the mobile, I figured I'd give it a try, get back in the old EVE universe, and at least be a little bit more mobile with it, so I'm not stuck downstairs playing on a computer all day.
How many hours do you think you play on average per day?
On Galaxy, quite a bit. This is what I do when I work from home. I've got the game up on the background, so I just keep going. It's probably 8 to 12. I work 11.5-hour shifts, so.
Oh, wow. So would you, and Reginald and Anthem, do both of you guys use emulators?
No,
well, I do
just
not.
go straight from mobile.
Straight from mobile, okay. And what about you, Reginald?
Yeah, I mainly use mobile, and now that EVE Galaxy is on the Google Play Store for Windows, I use that.
Okay. Yeah, because I know a lot of people are using BlueStacks and Nox and whatnot, which is just kind of funny because a lot of mobile gamers end up being PC gamers. They just, have multiple devices that they plan. So it's just a little comical. What about you, Doomsy? What got you interested in EVE Galaxy Conquest?
I played EVE for a long time prior to meeting my wife, and then with her, we were just looking for a game to play together because I was overseas in Japan, and we wanted some way that we could still game a little bit or at least connect. So we ended up settling on EGC because it was a universe I knew and a universe she knew, and just worked out. And then we just kept on playing, and here we are.
Very nice. Now, Doomsy, can you tell me some of the key differences between EVE Online and EVE Galaxy Conquest for those who don't know or don't play EVE Galaxy Conquest?
Loss is temporary in Conquest versus total in EVE Online. Even if you bother to take the time to pay for insurance for your ships, your loss is still in a much grander scale in EVE Online than it is in EVE Galaxy Conquest, as well as the relationships in EVE Galaxy Conquest are much more carefully crafted and can be much more detrimental to your growth as a character, because reputation in the game, you can't change your name in EVE Online. You can't change your UID in EVE Galaxy, but that takes tracking that most mobile gamers don't contend with. It's a lot harder to change or hide your reputation on EVE Online than it is on Conquest.
Anthem, would you say that you agree with Doomsy's statement that your reputation is a bit more difficult and tricky to navigate in EVE Galaxy Conquest?
I'd say it's more tricky to navigate in EVE than Galaxy Conquest, simply because Galaxy, it's shorter seasons, so you're kind of there for a minute, and you're with a whole different group of people. And with that interim season, if you separate off from a group, you have that season in the middle, memories start to fade, and it's a little bit easier to reconnect. Whereas since in EVE, you're constantly in communication with the same people, your reputation is everything. If you're marked as untrustworthy, good luck getting any sort of deals done.
Now that kind of brings me to the next point, because, obviously a lot of people think mobile gamers are not as serious, but, as we've kind of come into the veteran server, we've seen teams get more and more avidly interested in tracking player IDs. Does your team track player IDs? And do you think that is a way to track, a player, let's say, who's kind of become untrustworthy? Are you able to kind of track that nefarious behavior?
As far as full on, are we tracking it? No. I'll be honest with you. I like my organization to stay a little bit more casual. I want my people to feel like they have, lives outside of the game and that they're free to go live their lives. I feel like the moment I start going down that route, I'm going to make it less of a game, more of a job, more of a hassle. Yeah, there's going to be spies anyways. It's the same concept that I basically followed on EVE. There's always going to be spies. You could spend every waking hour trying to eliminate spy. Someone's going to have a background conversation with someone. Information's going to get leaked. So I don't overly focus on it because it tends to just make you paranoid, tends to make you freak out, make you question your judgment. I just go straight forward. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. If the enemy shows up to stop us, well, either we're stronger than them or we're not.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. I will say espionage is definitely a thing in EVE, and we have seen some of it in EVE Galaxy Conquest. Reginald, how do you think espionage has played a role in EVE Galaxy Conquest? Do you think it's as strong as in EVE Online, or do you think it's not really as big of a component?
Well, currently, I don't think it's as big of a component. I don't exactly know how much it affects actual EVE Online, because I have not delved that far into it. And while it's for sure a factor in Galaxy Conquest, it's not that big of a deal unless the spies actually get like a higher position to be able to get like very much internal intel. Then it could be for sure a problem. We did actually start tracking like IDs and players way more closely this season. We didn't used to do it before, but we have developed like our own tooling outside of the game to track everything, which kind of requires a lot of manual work due to there being no API, so spreadsheets all day. But yeah, we are trying to like identify the good players and put them in positions of power.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, that's very smart. If it is there anything you can kind of explain for, say, an EVE Online player who hasn't played EVE Galaxy Conquest, in what potentially a spy could reveal, or what really they can actually do? Because you said it's not really much. What would be the purpose then?
Well, for one, it gives you easier access to some information, like, for example, what rallies are currently active, where fleets are gathering. But this information can also be seen by other factions. It's just not as easily available. You have to actually go and like look at the map, see the info for yourself, as opposed to being part of the corporation gives you like an easy list of like what is currently happening. And also the internal mail. So there is information what to do, when to do it, that is sent out to members in mails. And of course, if you are in the corporation, you have access to those. So you could be relaying that information to your main corporation.
Yep, absolutely. I'd say the one other thing that I've noted is spies can see where you put your gardener bots. That's for basically the bot that you spend credits on, and it passes towards stations where you're trying to capture them. So if you do have an enemy in your team, they can see where you're trying to grid link. So that's another area. Um, let's see. I was gonna see Doomsy. Tell me, how did you come to be in the team New Order?
I started the game playing with my wife back in October, and we joined the Whales. I think it was the Whales, anyways, and that was around probably the 3/4 completion point of the first season of the game, maybe halfway. And we got there. We promised ourselves we would stay out of leadership and just be line members. That didn't go very well, obviously, but I just stayed with her and with my friends and ended up with New Order. Actually, I think, yeah, it was New Order last season, and then we merged with New Order and we forwent the whale name and became New Order. And then this season we stayed New Order. Yeah, just kind of good community. I've enjoyed playing with Fish. I've enjoyed the people that have made the command team. I still enjoy the game enough that I don't regret my purchases. So
That makes I think that makes some of us. I think I do know we've had some people who have a little bit of buyer's remorse. But before we get into that, I did want to see both Reginald and Anthem how they came to be in their team. Anthem, why don't we start with you? How did you come into No Mercy, or did you start No Mercy, and what made you want to start it?
First day of season 1, I looked around, I listened to the other corps talk. I was like, yeah, none of these fit me. All right, well, I'm going to start my own corp. Started my own corp. Guy next to me is named Barglefarf. I was like, hey, Barglefarf, you want to join the corp? He was the first member. He was the second in command, and we just rolled from there.
Awesome. So you've stayed pretty much true to your brand the entire time. How do you think that's impacted you? Because each season, maybe can you explain to somebody who hasn't played EVE Galaxy how seasons merge and what that means for recruitment?
So we don't merge. No Mercy, we just don't merge. Other people merge into us on occasion, people that feel like they don't have a home or people that got dropped during other merges when power couples come together and all the strong people go to one side at the end of the season. Everybody left over kind of falls down to us. We take them under our wing, give them a home to have. So that's kind of our recruitment method. The casuals, filthy casuals, they all come to my side and we've been in shape. We get them to the point where they're actually fighting, enjoying the game, anything that they couldn't get because they felt like we're competing with people way outside their rounds. We kind of help bridge that gap, get them from that early point to that point where they're actually competent in fighting and feel like they can actually take on more combat-related activities.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, that's you kind of have to have teams of various, play styles. Reginald, what about you? What was your journey starting from the beginning until now?
Well, I joined K1R Imperium, which is a different corp in season 1, and continued with them up until season 3, at which point at the end of season 3, we have talked with Imperium, and we have both came to the conclusion that for the veteran season, we are going to have to become stronger than we currently are. So we basically merged half and half Imperium and K1R Imperium. The names also merged, funnily enough. So I guess it was destiny in that way. So I have come from the K1R Imperium half, and currently I am the director for Imperium. Yeah, it's half and half corp now, but we have merged together very successfully, and now we are one big team.
Very nice. Now, Doomsy, can you kind of elaborate, explain why these teams are constantly merging per season? Just because for an EVE Online player, there is not seasons, there aren't multiple servers. So can you explain how that works for a player who doesn't necessarily know how EVE Galaxy Conquest works?
Yeah, on the end of every season, every corporation who didn't win is faced with the choice of how do we win next season. And definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So everyone typically comes to the same conclusion. We either merge and become a bigger, stronger, more robust corp for next season, or we recruit enough people from other corporations to become a large enough, robust enough corporation to do better next season. Typically, merging is easier because you can move 50, 60, 80 people at one time, whereas recruiting is a long-term effort that requires building rapport, sending out messages, messaging people and following up, gaining their trust, gaining their dependence upon you in some way, encouraging them to depend upon you and your corporation. Merging is just the path of least resistance to growth at the end of the season, when most people are already, because they've lost, they feel like, oh, well, this corporation didn't do so well for me, maybe this next one will. And so it's just the easiest way to pick up the falling pieces.
And that's a really good explanation. I would say there's almost some kind of gameplay that happens a little bit in Discord in between seasons, because seasons on average last, what, about a month and a half or so? Would you guys say that's correct?
My brain says 2 to 3 months.
2 to 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was gonna say the same. It's just, I think it's closer to 2.5 months, 2.23, something like there, around there.
All right,
Yeah.
everybody note, Fish is bad at math. Yeah, so about 2 to 3 months, we have about one season, and then by the end of it, people start kind of trying to make relationships. Would you guys say that you use the official Discord to start branching out and making relationships to see if you can talk to corps that are in other servers that you can potentially merge with? Anthem, why don't you go ahead?
I'm very famously bad at using Discord. So, no, in that case, I don't. I tend to let people come to me. My guys tend to say we don't really have too much fall off between seasons because my guys aren't really. They're not the hyper competitive. They're not playing for first. They're playing to kill people. So my guys don't really drop off whether we lose or win. We just tend to grow. And I always have people reaching out to me just trying to chat. Last season was an exception. We did have a little bit of Discord kung fu going on. But typically I try to stay out of Discord. I focus on the game. I stay in the game. Any time I spend in Discord is time that I'm not spending setting up rallies, sending out troops.
Well, I'm definitely envious of that. I do say that sometimes I feel like I'm spending a lot of time in Discord. Reginald, how about you? Do you feel like your team kind of did cross-server politics, or do you guys feel like you try to stay mostly in the game?
Well, we have been staying a lot in the game, mostly doing politics with corporations that are on the same server as us. The exception is before servers are merged, we sometimes do reach out to other corps that we will be in the next season, but we don't really do that much of outreach in the official Discord. It doesn't really feel like the official Discord is set up in that way as well. It's very hard to actually figure out who is who and like who is CEOs, who is directors. So it's not really that easy to use that as a recruiting tool, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys, Reginald, can you continue a little bit and tell me what can a new player who started on season 1, what can they expect to experience as seasons progress? You know, how has season 1, how is it different from season 2 to 3? And I guess we're technically in 4, but it's still considered 3. So, you know, how would you say that your gameplay has progressed and what can they expect over this period of time?
Well, I don't know exactly the state of the seasons ones right now, but for sure season 1 is like way less managed. The corporations are still figuring out what's going on. So it's a perfect place to actually learn the game. It's a perfect place to like focus on personal development and maybe start some relationships going on with corporations and other people. You know, just like kind of learn the game, get into it. And as the corporations also evolve, you will find your home at some point and like more permanent. You will start getting into the further seasons. The difficulty will increase, and that kind of requires you to keep up with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doomsy, what do you think? How would you describe your gameplay season 1? Do you think it was more strategic, less strategic? How do you think it's progressed, or how do you think it's changed over the various seasons?
I would, sorry, I had the chat box selected, so I started rapidly typing. I would be remiss to not mention that the gameplay has changed drastically since season 1, and so when the game first released, everyone still had the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, as long as I build my fleet better and I have progressed further, I will do better than the person next to me. And that was quickly dispelled with ship releases and stat changes and build changes and certain functions that not everyone agrees with, myself included, for purchases of premium ships, and so that was quickly dispelled. I think strategy at first was just progress faster, build bigger, have larger numbers, and that turned into read the abilities, put the abilities against your commanders, make sure they synergize, and now it's fleet agents and so on and so forth. I would say strategy has evolved upward to a degree, but it has a glass ceiling where certain things have functions that other things do not, and the only way to achieve those is to purchase them or get really lucky, which some people have. But the bulk of it is a strategy has a glass ceiling where an Amex will get you through it faster than luck will.
Now, Anthem, you mentioned you have a team of more casual players. They're not necessarily pay to win. Do you think this is echoed throughout your team as well? Do you feel like your team has kind of seen this disparity between players who really pay for these newer ships like the Tornado, the Abaddon, and then, specific rigs or implants that go with either the ships or the commanders? How have you seen that affect your team?
It absolutely has. As far as my free to play, it's getting harder and harder to keep the free to play players playing. Anytime that you can get a player that's wiped, 29,000 to 0, and they didn't do a single bit of damage in a fight, it stings, especially when the ship's not easily obtainable. If it's a situation where it's just a matter of them obtaining the ship or obtaining a commander combo to get them effective, even as a free to play, then I can work with that. I can find ways to help those players grind out. Target station takes for time periods where there's a recruitments going, things like that, to ensure that there's a ton of Nova for them to actually get those draws. But when it's just a simple, if you're lucky enough to get the ship or you pay enough to get the ship, then all of a sudden your power level expands by exponential amounts. That's a lot harder as a CEO position to work with the free-to-play players on. You have to work with free-to-play counters to those, but those free-to-play players are also getting less pulls, less draws, which then impacts the actual pool of commanders that are available to them and the actual pool of ships that are available to them to counters. So when that premium ship has a single specific line of counters that are good against it, if you don't have those counters, there's no way for you to realistically fight that player or any player with that ship. And that's where I think we need to do a little bit of work on as far as like game management, and that needs to be worked out because my free to play players still need a path to success.
Yep.
Obviously, they're not spending as much keeping the game going, but there needs to be a path for them to succeed still without putting in a ton of money into the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could just posit one thing on what he was saying, I do want to point out that one thing I can appreciate about CCP is they are making efforts to create counters capabilities. For example, the Abaddon was a terrifying ship last season. It was absolutely dominating everything. And then over time, we found through the patches that the Catalyst performed excellently against it with the proper build. And the Catalyst is much more attainable than the Abaddon is. You don't need to pull out an Amex to get that one. You can get that one just off a free pool. So yes, absolutely, I agree with you. But I do appreciate that they are leaving enough room for counters to exist if you're willing to do the build testing and run your ship against someone's Abaddon and just see how it does. I do think the game needs a simulation center where you can create a fake build and then throw your build against it and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that would be amazing because I think we have to use, anytime you want to reset your ship or commander, you have to use an initialization protocol, which can be kind of expensive. Reginald, I was curious, do you think this game is kind of more pay to win, or do you think it's pay to progress, or where do your thoughts lie on this?
It's kind of a difficult question. There is for sure a visible gap between a free-to-play and a paid player. I think everyone realizes that the gap exists. But I still feel like even a free-to-play player can contribute strongly to the corporation they are in. Maybe not in the ways of like pure firepower. You can still do a lot. You can participate in sieges. You can help capture grids. You can set up defenses. So while free-to-play players are significantly disadvantaged in actual like head-on fights, they can still contribute a lot if they are active.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's one metric that we don't necessarily see valued a lot. A lot of times teams will value influence or military exploits, but we don't not necessarily always see what I call, tile grabbers, the like the lower fleets that are able to grab all the red tiles around, or the players who build disruption fields or outposts to help block the enemy, and those can be such valuable players. So definitely don't want to undervalue them as well. I want to hear kind of everybody's thoughts on the newest ship, which is the Tornado. Do you guys have it? What do you think about it? Do you think it's overpowered? Reginald, why don't we start with you?
So I was lucky and I got it twice actually, but with random pools. But I don't feel like it's super overpowered. It's nice for sure, but I think it's like an alternative to the Rifter right now. Uh, it's strong for sure, but I wouldn't call it overpowered, no.
Okay. And what about you, Doomsy? How do you feel about the NATO?
I have mixed emotions. I have counters for it, but I also don't necessarily agree with giving a ship an ability that was previously made a premium fleet agent. They've outmoded the tactical control fleet agent for the Tornado by just giving it the tactical controls ability on its first ability of the ship, minus the burn. So I'm a bit torn. It's beatable, but it is like the Abaddon was last season, where it does outmode mini builds that were popular, and it runs right through a lot of things, particularly once it's 3-star. But I mean, this is the argument with every new ship: is it's until a reliable counter is made, and you reach that reliable counter, because you obviously have to have the ship, the commanders, the fleet agents, the levels, the stars. Until you achieve that, or someone figures out a good one and it becomes popular opinion, the ship's going to look overpowered. But I have seen it beaten easily, so I'm torn. I just don't agree with its first ability.
That makes sense. And Anthem, what do you think? Do you like the NATO? Do you think the Abaddon is still like last season? Pretty much, it was almost unanimous across various servers. Everyone felt the Abaddon was very overpowered. Do you think that the Tornado is as overpowered, or do you like would you say regarding those two ships?
I didn't really have a problem with the Abaddon last season. The counters were various. There were a dozen different ways to build the Abaddon. I personally used about 6 different combinations in it, and each one had a different counter that would work well against it, and different things that it would work well against. That made the ship itself more flexible, and also made it, in my eyes at least, less overpowered, because it all depended on how you build it. For the Tornado, I typically just see 2 commanders used in it. It seems pretty much pigeonholed. I'm not seeing very much build variety. I think the abilities are overtuned. It feels like they threw too much into the box of one ship. The tactical control being added on top of a sweeper ship sounds good in practice, but when you take an eye at what else we have, in the box right now, it feels like the ship is actually pretty overtuned. I would hesitate to say overpowered. It does have counters, but if your only counter is specifically, two commanders and a ship works really well against it, pretty much everything else gets trashed. I think there's room to make an argument that it's overtuned for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the phrase overpowered. I'd rather stick with overtuned, because it's all it needs. Just a little bit of a tune down here and there to bring it in line.
Yeah, just a tweaking here and a tweaking there, and if like you basically what you're saying, if there was more counters other than just one specific pair and combo, then it would be a little bit more realistic. And again, for those free to play players with ships that are easier to pull, especially, I'm kind of curious to see what everyone's thoughts are on what is their favorite commander, or what is the most highly coveted commander. Anthem, why don't we start with you?
For me personally, commander-wise, I have to go with Chelm, with a secondary shout out to Drea. I just love both those commanders. Ship-wise, I'd have to go for my Tristan. I still don't have it 4-starred, so it's not on the field right now, but it's my absolute favorite ship we got, aside from my Oracle, which is my most used.
Nice, nice. And Reginald, what is your favorite commander, or the commander that you just think that you've been dying to get?
I really like Alexander. He's not the strongest, but he is pretty versatile, and like the stacking damage he can deal over the fight is pretty nice.
And what ship do you pair him with?
Usually a Vexor, but I have been experimenting with others.
Oh, very nice, very nice. And Doomsy, what about you?
I've grown to enjoy Karishal. I like Phallic. Karasoth I wish was better, But I think that for coveted, I would have to say Jamil. She's a game changer on a lot of builds.
Yeah, Jamil is definitely the illustrious woman that I can never roll her. So she's a difficult one. Does anybody here have Jamil? Anthem?
Nope.
No.
Didn't spend that much money.
Reginald, how about you? Do you have Jamil?
I do have Jamil, but it's not. I don't have stars on her, so it's kind of difficult to actually slot her in a good comp.
So that's one of the hardest things. You pull the commander, and then you can't pull stars on them. So they end up just kind of sitting in your dock and collecting dust. So it's always a little bit difficult, but hopefully maybe you'll get a good pull soon. You'll be able to get her at least to 1 star. We'll see. Has anybody seen any 5-star Jamils yet?
I don't think
Not
so.
on my end.
I don't think so. I mean,
No.
if we do, we will all bow down to them. The 5-star Jamil, that would be insane. Let's see. We were going to have some of the 2008 players on this podcast, but we did have 2 guests who weren't able to make it, unfortunately, due to real life events. So I was going to ask to see, what their experience was and how it's different kind of coming into a server, because the players here are from 3001 and 3002, and 2008 was the only server that went from season 3 and jumped into season 4 with us. So that was a little bit interesting. We had a little bit of disparity there, but politics seemed to be going pretty steady. How do you guys think this has impacted politics for you guys? Anthem, I know you guys have some diplomatic relationships with Dynasty. Did you guys just want to reach out and work with them, or how did that work?
I've got a message stated that they needed some assistance. They wanted some allies moving forward. I said, sure, let's go for it.
Nice.
I was told they were starting behind the power curve, and it's with Tisha last season. Anytime I get a chance to help out a smaller alliance, kind of get them up to speed, I'm more than happy to do so. And they've been an excellent group of guys, excellent group of fighters. I've got no regrets there.
Absolutely. And Doomsy, what about you? Because I know you guys also had some of the team from 2008, and you're in a New Order.
I think New Order as a whole, particularly the leadership, but as a whole, I'd like to say that I feel like we've done a really good job in what I prefer, which is, even if we had a fight with Imperium last season, and there were moments where we were like, "Oh, guys, come on, you're kind of like being mean about this. It's like ruining the server," and then they just kind of chilled out. And next season, it was washed away. It was gone. It was like, "All right, cool. Well, you guys didn't perpetuate the hate, and so we're not going to either." I think we've done a really good job of not allowing opinions to ruin the season of the next season.
And that's always very important. Just kind of being able to let go of previous season drama, because we always people can start out as friends, become enemies, and then enemies become friends, and the cycle always continues. Do you guys think 2008 had a significant disadvantage to the 3001 and 3002 servers? Reginald, why don't you touch a little bit on that?
Oh yeah, I think that people from 2008 and 8 got kind of screwed because they missed on a whole season of Nova, of polls, of building strategy, building relations, which cannot be replaced by just giving them a starting boost in resources, because that is just temporary and doesn't really matter when we get to the mid game anyway. So it was a very questionable move by the developers, but on the other hand, I kind of see why they did it, because if they didn't pull any other server into there, it would basically come down to like 3 corps fighting each other, and there wouldn't be many variety. There wouldn't be like any surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthem, how do you think this might impact future seasons? Do you think they're going to start really mixing it up with former veterans with newer players, and do you think that's going to really shake up diplomacy for future seasons?
Well, I think what they're trying to do, in essence, with the veteran season is basically get everybody else caught up to us. That's why we went into the veteran season, since we were, the first to really break down the door for the game. There are a bunch of servers that are, just a season or so behind us. So holding us back for a season and, putting those 2008 to see how they reacted into our server and with our people, were they able to handle up? And I guarantee you they got a ton of useful data analytics out of it. So what I'm hoping to see is that the rest of the servers are able to catch up during this gap and that widens the amount of opportunities we have as far as corps to work with, corps to establish diplomatic relationships with, and keeps a fresh breath every single season. Because that also helps, with one of the main drawbacks of the seasonal model, which is once you start really getting aggressive with someone, and then the next season you have to work with them, bridging that gap in, okay, now I've got to learn to live with this person. I've got to learn to let go of the anger of last season and move forward. It gives more of a window for that, because like I said earlier, if there's a season between your interactions with a corp or a group, it's a lot easier to get those relations off to a fresh start, with a season gap in between. So we optimally want to mix it up. I don't want to have to play with Imperium every single season, take a break from Imperium, now we're playing with this group over here. Oh, back to Imperium the next season, awesome, I've got friends over there. And all of a sudden you come back and you realize that the whole situation's a lot more calm, a lot more easy to integrate, basically.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good point. And to that, I'll give a shout out, Tainted Powers. Thanks for being cool this season, man. He'll get what I mean.
Tainted's awesome.
Yes. But yeah, definitely completely understand your point about, having to kind of work with different people, keeping things fresh. I don't know. I think the 2008 guys on the server have been fantastic. I mean, I feel like we were able to recruit one guy and he feels like 10 players added to the team. So he's only playing one account, but he's been amazing. So that's definitely kept things fresh. Doomsy, do you agree that the boost in resources is the best way to kind of catch players up if they haven't been in as many seasons, or do you think there's a better way that CCP could help catch up these players into these veteran servers?
I don't think I've ever seen a more nearly physical digital backhand. That was probably the poorest way I could have imagined they could have handled that for the players who were being introduced to this season. It was unfair in every function, in my opinion. I think if they were going to do it properly, one, there's no way to do it fairly, because you're shortchanging the people who have already been through the season and have already gone through those roles, in the fact that they already have those ships. So anytime they get them after the fact, they're just starring them. In which case, you either have to kneecap them and prevent them from getting them, which is imbalanced because there's no way for that to be unilaterally fair, or you have to give a certain amount of ships bonus probability rate roll for those who come from the season before, which is still hamstringing the other side. There's no way to do it that is perfect, but I think the best way to do it would have been to just give most people or all people from the server coming in a choice between the premium ships and premium commanders. Pick one commander, pick one ship, go on, and start them out at 1 star. That at least gives them a guaranteed good ship from the previous season, gives them the ability to select it, which is still more than we had for most, but it's done in such a way that unless they already know the builds, unless they already know the metas, unless they already know exactly how they're going to build it with alts, it lowers the margin of error, I would say, where people just get, an extra 10k of every resource for a set amount of time. That's only good for until you get to level 7s, which is just like a day and a half. So I don't think it was handled well.
Reginald, do you have any feedback to what Doomsy said in terms of how they could have integrated the players better from 2008?
I absolutely agree with what Doomsy said. I like the idea of selecting a ship. I also like the idea of giving them just a bunch of pulls, maybe something like the dominance cache, but boost it all the way up with a bunch of free pulls on it, because those people need to catch up, and that gap is gonna get only bigger as more veteran seasons cycle, and people who are now in season 1 are gonna have to catch up to people who are in the veteran season for 3 times already. So there needs to be some catch-up mechanism that is more permanent than just resource boost.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And Anthem, what's their feedback?
Now, honestly, on that, Doomsy seems to have the most rational position on it. I can't really disagree with anything he said. There needs to be a catch-up mechanism, like Reginald said, and I don't know. I don't want people feeling like they're putting under their head and then have us have more attrition on player base. So I would like to see it corrected in a manner that makes both the veterans feel respected And the new people being thrown in there with the veterans, because time and ship is a big factor.
Mm-hmm.
Flying the ship enough that you get to use different combinations, figure out what counters what. That's a huge benefit. The 10,000 resources, there's no way for that to be overcome.
Yep, absolutely. And we also don't want the newer players to feel kind of like forced into political relationships that they don't necessarily want to if they feel like there's a gun against their head and they have no other options. So that definitely makes sense.
Also, if I may add to it,
Yeah.
I really think it would be nice if we got like way more heads up what servers are getting merged together, way longer time to actually develop the relations before the actual season starts. I feel like there like isn't like enough time to actually start talking with the people that you are gonna be playing with before the season starts.
That's definitely a good point. I do think that a lot of things that I've seen players say is that they feel like near the end of the season, there's a giant lull in the game. How would you say, like, would you agree with that? And that near the end of the season, everyone kind of feels a little directionless. Like you capture Jita, and then now what do we do? Reginald?
Well, it heavily depends on the state of the server. If the server ended up in a place where one corp like totally dominates, it is very much not interesting. But if there is still like challengers active, like if we were in the last season, we were fighting with Imperium basically to the last moment before we merged. So like even then we had basically our work set out right until they announced the server closure. So it's like difficult to balance. It depends server on server. But I would kind of enjoy some like week or two of actual quiet time where we can like regroup, talk on Discord, like without being online 24/7 as we are in like all the other times in the season.
You need a little bit of a break. That's that's always a main point from leadership. Is I feel like leadership is like, I don't mind having a little break before the next season starts, because anytime a season starts, it feels like your sleep schedule is disrupted. You're on constantly. It's very intense. It's very brutal if you're playing. I don't imagine how, or I can't imagine how people play various alts and still function regularly. But I mean, some people do it, so more power to them. Doomsy, I was curious because CCP said that the veteran season had promised us a lot of different things. We had features like a larger, more dynamic battlefield, rapid development, a rally platform, grid requisition. Do you think that do you think they delivered on these promises, or how do you feel about the latest updates that came out?
I think they're moving in the wrong direction. They're trying to expand the way Battlefield occurs in a turn-based hexagonal map, and it is not, in my opinion, the root of the problem that leads to, one, the rampant map takeover, but two, the pressure from people to, oh, hey, freedom. It doesn't alleviate the actual issue, in my opinion. I think the actual issue is that the only thing you have to do in the game is expand and kill. I think that they should have been introducing would be some kind of NPC force that invades portions of the maps. They should have introduced rifts. They should have introduced wormholes. They should have introduced large NPC bases that otherwise have fleets that have in no way give you like Corp Legends score, but you can beat it for leveling. You can beat it for commanders. You can beat it for ships, tiles. You can, files. They're not introducing something else. It's just expand, kill, and all they did was expand that system, and that is not providing any content for the people who are free to play, who take till 3/4 into the season to have a viable fleet. It doesn't provide content for people who don't know how to play yet. It doesn't provide content for people who are not in a corp who could teach them how to play, and it doesn't provide new content for the end of the season when all the combat's done and the map is taken over and the corp that won is one so declared monstrously that you can't unseat them from their throne. And so yeah, that's why you get the lull. Once all the combat's ended, everyone who lived for the expand to kill has nothing else to do. And then you get stuff like the Thunderdome, which is just a stopgap.
I think people call it the Thunderdome or just any sort of PvP zone. Usually near the end of seasons, a lot of different servers will have planned PvP. which is personally not my favorite. But I was kind of curious because you touched on something about one of the newer things that happened. Um, how do you guys feel about CCP making it so that once you hit level 45 in the veteran server, you can only get to level 50 through PvP? Anthem, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
I'm mixed on it. I think in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. I have commanders that I would love to hit around level 50 because they're excellent PvE commanders, but I know if I fit them in a PvP boat, they're going to get blown out of the water, and it's just going to be a miserable component slog trying to get them up to 50. So
Mm-hmm.
those commanders at a certain point I'm probably less likely to use, just looking at it logically. So I'd say if the game was a little more balanced and there was a wider range of targets to actually engage and there was less of a draw for specific commanders, it would be a good play. But as is, it feels like it's more of a handicap than anything when it comes to taking the level 10 grids, which for a lot of the free-to-play players, you're going to want to have level 48 to 50 commanders on. It's going to slow down that progress by quite a bit, and I'm not sure that any gain that was gained from it is worth it.
And what did you think about Doomsy's feedback in terms of, they're adding more content, but it's not necessarily expanding. They're adding content, but it's not really providing more content. They're just kind of expanding what's existing. Whereas he spoke about, adding rifts or adding a sort of enemy, not necessarily a station to gain Corp Legend score, but something that you can almost you can level up your PvE commanders by beating not just a pirate, but a sort of, what was it specifically you mentioned, Doomsy?
I was saying that they could have introduced a system of like a pirates invading or NPC stations that have pirates in them, like incursion zones, if you will, or rifts or wormholes.
Yeah. Anthem, what do you think about that?
Now that would definitely be in. As for the things they added this season, I haven't used Requisition, Rally Station. I'm not really interested. I don't really see too much use for them right now. Sure, I'll start using them as time goes on. I'll figure them out. But they're nothing that really draws me. I think something along the lines of what Doomsy was saying. There needs to be more PvE activities because there are a ton of casual players, and right now, it's all focused on the PvP, which is awesome. I love PvP; it's my favorite part of the game. But I have players that if they had a way that they could just, mine all day and make resources for the corporation, or increased ISK production for the corporation, do some sort of like a corporate siege fleet that specifically seeks out mining tiles and raises everybody's income by X percentage for the next few hours. Things like that would go a long way towards giving additional activities for our members to do, rather than, hey, move to the front line, take tiles, fight. Move to the front line, take tiles, fight. Hey, you path from this station to this station. Spend 6 hours trying to build a path just to get knocked out and have those tiles taken back up. There just needs to be a larger variety of activity. And if we can get those activities in the game, I think it'll go a long way towards the healthiness of the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. Reginald, what are your thoughts on it?
I for sure agree that there needs to be some sort of other like gameplay purpose other than like straight up PvPing on the front lines. I would love to see any kind of like good PvE that everyone can participate in, not just like the winning side or not just the whales. And if I can come back to like the greater requisitioning and stuff, I actually really like the idea of greater requisitioning of the Corp, but I have not actually figured out the way to do it in the game. I'm not sure it even exists. So that was very like disappointing to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just me.
Yeah, we have no way to actually requisition grids, and we were very excited to use it. And instead of greater acquisition, we got the home base bug where you cannot relocate unless you capture like random grids around the center tile, which caused a lot of chaos when trying to relocate and member confusion.
No, yeah, absolutely. So you're talking more about like the issues with the gantries, is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember the first time I started trying to make my gantry, and everybody was just like, "The gantry's not working. We're not able to build gantries." And so, yeah, that definitely, some of the fixes don't feel like they're working as intended. What are some suggestions that you would make that you think could enhance the game, kind of similar to what Doomsy was saying? What are other suggestions that you think that you've either seen in the suggestion field in the official Discord, or just something that your team has talked about that you think would enhance the social aspect, or just like add more content to the game in general?
Well, firstly, I would like to touch on the 45 PvE level cap real quick.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
I kind of like the idea, however, I think the execution is completely like wrong because of how PvP currently works. The win and the loss are like very one-sided usually, and especially people who don't have like strong counter fleets and stuff, they have no way of actually leveling up beyond level 45, while the people who have strong fleets just basically get stronger because they are winning. So in the current state there, I feel like there needs to be some way of like catching up to those levels. I would love to, for example, see an alternative version of the combat simulator in the Corp, where you could actually combat other commanders in your corporation, like duels or some sort of arena, which could get you maybe reduced, but some sort of PvP XP as well, and that could also be used to like actually try out fleets. Not the ideal way, but at least it would be some sort of way to get fighting XP.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought one change that I feel like it's pretty straightforward, but even just like, because we're only allowed to have 2 allies in the game, and I do like the restriction of not having too many blues, but I did think that being able to have some sort of alliance chat would be nice, and then also having the ability to not lose cap in an allied territory would be nice. Maybe not necessarily being able to use their stations that they've captured, but just being able to not lose capacitor, I think would be nice. What do you guys think in that aspect? Doomsy?
I think that that would make sense so long as you were obviously set to blue and they created a building that would allow for that. For example, they created the rally platform that's supposed to buff defenses or manipulate itself to the battlefield, which has not yet been released to my knowledge, but it's supposed to be. They could create some kind of relay that you could build in allied territory that would give a large radius of capacitor production, which would allow for allied movement. It gives you, 1, cause to go into your allied territory and collaborate. 2, help defend your allies because that's where your relays are. And 3, when you build those relays, you can then freely move through their space without losing cap.
Absolutely. And what about you, Anthem? What do you think? Do you think they need more ally functionality, or do you think it's fine the way it is?
No, they definitely need ally functionality. I need to be able to find different ways to interact with my allies, because right now they're just people on the map we don't attack. There's not really a large amount of functionality you can get there. They're penalized for moving into my space. They can't build off my gates. It's restrictive, right? And there's not really too much that my allies can do to assist me. I would like ways to have more of an integrated, frontline force, where I could have my guys fighting alongside their guys against someone else's guys and their allies,
Yep, absolutely.
Bigger battles, more fun.
It almost feels like being neutral is more beneficial, because if you have a neutral, technically an ally, but they're neutral, they can set up tiles and then you can capture them, and then you can grid off those captured tiles, but you can't actually grid off of your own ally, which seems, yeah, there definitely, in my opinion, could be some tweaks to the alliances. Any other kind of recommendations on what you guys think could improve the game? Reginald, do you have any kind of other ideas or feedback that you think would help improve the game?
I think there is a lot of improvements that could be made in the like social side of the game for sure. Not only like the chat itself, the possible rooms you mentioned, the like alliance chat. I really like that idea, but like the tools we have to, for example, see player activity, what they are up to when they are active. I think we need more tools to not just like socially engage with our corp members and everyone on the server. We also need more tools to like know what is going on without being online 24/7.
Yep, absolutely. Anthem, any other kind of tools that you think, any tools or any upgrades that you think the game could use, other than just we need kind of more end game content?
So you do have the end game content, like you said, but we also need like Reginald said, I need to be able to see who's active at what times, and the fact they have the group functionality, but I can't add people to multiple groups. So I can't have a generic leadership group and then have, okay, this is our 00 UTC to 8 UTC crew. Then, their main active time, all them in there. I can't have them in both groups, and I
Yep.
can't manage more than one group. So the UI functionality is fairly clunky on that side. I just need more ways to direct my troops,
Mhm.
direct my players, more avenues for my free to plays to catch up, and then more functionalities with my allies. If I can get those three things set up, I'll be a happy camper. I just want to be able to work with my allies more efficiently without it being we have to go neutral for 2 hours, then I have to capture this, and then we have to go unneutral, and maybe we'll have to go neutral again in the future. That whole dynamic is just ugly and inefficient. And then not being able to tell who's active and when really hurts when it's like, all right, are we going to do the push right now? Do I have my people on? Should I give it another 5 minutes? Should I give it another 10 minutes? Having that level of information would really be useful when it comes from a management perspective and knowing when to time things and when to push.
Especially when you, like you said earlier, you're not trying to be spending all your time in Discord. I feel like right now, a lot of times, leadership in EVE Galaxy Conquest are kind of using all sorts of other kind of jimmy rigged situations to figure out who's online and when. We, for instance, use Discord just to see, all right, do we have kind of like this sort of group online? Okay, yeah, we're good to make a push. And like you said, making groups is already tedious as it is. It's a drag and drop function. Even if you search a name, it's very difficult to put a group together, but it's limited. And then you can put teams together, but you're limited to 15 members per team. And that's kind of its own issue in its own right. So I definitely agree with that. What about you, Doomsy? Any social improvements that you think could be added to the game to just enhance, either UI or just social functionality?
They were already touching on the time zones. Which leads me to EVE Online has had decades of development, and this game is not made by NetEase, and so there is no logical reason in my mind assets cannot be shared between dev teams of CCP EVE Online and CCP EVE Galaxy Conquest and adapted, because of course mobile is different than desktop. I don't see why they can't expand the role system for you to create custom roles and then create custom role alerts and custom role zones, and in that you could create your time zones and you could separate people out and have groups, fleets, squads, wings. All of these structures already exist, and they could very well be restructured for mobile, I believe. And I think that would greatly expand, one, the tactical capability, but two, it would reduce the amount of direct input that players have to have day to day in order to maintain functional activity in group activities or corp activities, because some people are in Europe and they're the whale, and now they feel obligated to stay up until 4 a.m. their time because they're the whale, and so without them, the team is in trouble. And that creates an undue real life social stress, I think, that could be easily fixed with a system that already exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just looking at our time frame, it looks like we've got about 15 minutes, maybe 30 more before our shows end. Before we do kind of come to a conclusion, I did want to share with anybody who's watching just to kind of get an idea of where we're at with our veteran server, to see what our map's currently looking like, and then just see our corp rankings. A second. All right, so I'm just showing up a new screen. So just kind of quickly here, we can see Reforged, who is in the Minmatar faction, is currently holding first place. They're pretty full in terms of corp members. If you don't play EVE Galaxy Conquest, you do have a corp limit of 250 players. I believe at the start of the season, you start with about 150. No Mercy, this is Anthem's corp. He is in second rank, and he's also looking pretty full. Imperium, this is Reginald's corp, and they're in third place. We have New Order in fourth. And then, unfortunately, like our Reforged and Dynasty members were not able to come, just again had real life stuff going on. But we here are kind of the top 5 corps, kind of in what their ranking is. You can see the different corp legend scores, and this is changed by how many stations they have. And then next, this is just kind of a peek at our map. So right now we have Dynasty and New Order, who are in Galente faction currently. No Mercy is Caldari. Reforged is Minmatar, so that's going to be all this red, or as Doomsy likes to call it, rust. I mean, it is rust, but I don't know. We disagree. Rust is red or brown. And then the yellow here is Imperium, and that's going to be Reginald. So just kind of coming back to our guests. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why everybody chose their factions, if it was just solely because you love EVE Online and you love that faction, or if it was strategic and it was meant for, basically, like if there's some sort of strategy in how you kind of selected where you're going, whether it was because of what your ally was doing or, the map section. Anthem, is there a specific reason? Because I know you guys weren't you Caldari last season as well?
Yeah, we were Caldari last season. We wanted to go to Galente this season. And then when I went to go select Galente, it said full. And I was like, oh, well, we're going to go Caldari instead then. We'll go Galente in a future season. And we just rolled over there because there was already enough in Galente. The last thing you guys needed was us stacking in there as well.
Damn, that's too bad. Because, yeah, I think New Order and Dynasty were having PvP since pretty much I'm not even joking, day one, they were having PvP. So that would have been definitely a full house. Doomsy, do you have any feedback as to why you guys chose Galente? Was there a strategic reason?
There was a lot of thought in where we were going to go, and we basically just wanted to go Caldari or Galente. We've been going around the map, and we already knew that Reforge was going to take over Minmatar again, more than likely. And so we had Caldari, Galente, Amar. Imperium had already more or less announced they were going Amar. No Mercy had more or less announced that they were going to be going Caldari, so Galente was a natural choice. Also, it gave us what we believed to be a good amount of space to expand into and prepare for what would eventually be at the time, to my knowledge and my thought process, the 2v2 war. At the time I had not accounted for Dynasty, but then they joined us in Galente space, and that changed. But it was mostly so that server balance was the main argument: Imperium and us versus No Mercy and Reforged.
Yep. And Reginald, was there a specific strategy or just rhyme or reason for choosing Amar space?
Well, for one, Imperium has been in Amar space historically all seasons, so we kind of just defaulted to that. And for second, we knew that Reforge are going Minmatar, so we thought kind of like we are gonna fight them at some point either way, so why not like fight them right as the gates open?
Yep. So almost kind of being able to pre-select where everyone's going, Corps could kind of see and almost do fairly even matchups, which I would say that did happen. I would say New Order and Dynasty had some really good battles. I'd say Imperium and Reforged are having a lot of great PvP. I'm not in there, so I can't say definitively or not. And then Anthem, I'd say you're having pretty good PvP as well, correct?
Yep, we initially started off fighting you guys down in Sync. Now we're fighting Imperium. Imperium kind of pushed us back a little bit, and we're rotating around for the next area. But it's been pretty much nonstop fights since low sec really opened, and we finally got positioning.
Yep. Have you guys noticed any trends over the seasons? Does Sync seem to be a pretty hot spot for fights, or do you guys notice it kind of just varies depending on who you're facing? Anthem, why don't you go first?
It depends on how quick the push is and how strong the player in Caldari is. If it's a really strong Caldari-based alliance, they can pretty much swing through Sync and get to those bottom two Stargates and pretty much lock them down fairly effectively. If those get locked down, then all the fighting's going to happen into Void almost unilaterally. If Sync is able to get broken into, then the fighting will happen between Devoid and Sync. So it really just depends on how those initial stages of the low sec movements really play out and where everybody ends up positioned.
Mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense. Reginald, would you agree with that?
Yeah, we are currently getting pushed back by Reforged, so we kind of got placed into a spot that we have to fight out of. So, yeah, we didn't really have much choice in the position we currently are.
Yep. But hey, you're still fighting, so that's what matters most. And Doomsy, what would you say? Have you noticed a trend, or has there been any trends for the various seasons you've been in of where you seem to be fighting most?
Vitinin and Sone and Igniting, which those are the three that are typically. When we were Caldari, we ended up fighting there. When we were Amara, we ended up fighting there. When we were Galente now this season, we ended up fighting there. Those always seem to be the three hot spots. Occasionally, it'll break into Khaneed if Galente pushes down while facing Amara, but it's almost always in sync. I've found Minmatar has the rush tactic still, I believe, and so they usually end up in sync as well.
Interesting. All right. Well, guys, it's been amazing having you guys as panel guests. Is there any last kind of thoughts, feedback, or shout outs you guys want to give before we do our sign off? Reginald, we'll start with you.
Well, it's been great being on here, great talking with everyone here. And the only thing I can just say is that we are always open to talking. Our Discord is open to all diplomacy, all players. So yeah, swing by, contact me, join the Discord. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. ODoomsy, anything you'd like to share or say?
Good fights going forward.
Awesome. Very short and sweet and simple. And what about you, Anthem?
Not quite as short and sweet, but I just want to thank all the main groups for the fights this season. They've been great so far. Shout out to the No Mercy guys. Thank you guys for sticking with me for so long. I love you dudes. And beyond that, anybody else out there looking for a home, if you're in the server and you're kind of feeling out of place, feel free to drop me a line. Any diplomats need contact, drop me a line. I'm not usually on Discord, but you can always hit me up in game and eventually pry me away to Discord. I'll be more than happy to talk there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day and fly safe. Thank you guys.
Fly safe.
Thanks.
And thank you guys so much for joining us with the Talking In Station special edition of EVE Galaxy Conquest. Fly safe, Capsulers.